This podcast is supported by listeners like you. We're grateful for your tax-deductible donation at newthoughtphilly.org or the link in the episode description.
A practical prayer is a prayer that works.
These discussions between Reverend Bill Marcioni and Carol Lawrence dive into the details of how it works and how to work it.
Reverend Bill is a New Thought minister and the author of Practical Prayer for Real Results.
Your new life begins with a new thought.
Carol Lawrence is on a spiritual quest, finding the New Thought teaching after decades on the pulpit in 3 different traditional denominations.
I've got some questions.
Together, they're exploring the philosophy and activities that come together from many of the world's religions to create the practical spirituality that is New Thought.
Welcome to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marcioni, and we got a conversation going.
We do. We got a conversation ready to happen, and I neglected to ask you before we started the podcast what it was going to be about. So you get to surprise me.
Well, you know what? Sometimes we talk in the pre-show and change the subject before we get to the actual podcast.
Sometimes in the middle of a question, we change the subject. But yes, I'm with you.
Yes. Do you know what it has taken? I'm talking to everybody now. Do you know what it's taken for me to get used to doing that? Because I am a planner. It's there, and if you deviate, I got to jump all over the place and try to jump with you. And you have so much information, so much content. You're just giving it out. And I'm thinking, okay, when he pauses, now what part am I going to extract? Because I know everybody's not getting this because this is like going fast. So I have learned a lot. Just like you said at your panel that you were moderating, you learned something. I have learned with you among the many principles and things in New Thought is how to take the ride.
There you go. And somewhere along the 160 episodes that we've done, you gave up your membership card as a control freak. You used to claim yourself to be a card-carrying control freak, and you've given up the card.
Yeah, I would love to say I gave it up, but in the interest of honesty and full transparency, I really intend never to use it, but it's there in the drawer sometime, and I open the drawer and it's looking at me, and it's like so tempting to reach for it and say, I can fix this. I don't have to go through all this. But
having the skill set is one thing, but claiming it as a membership card is different. And you have definitely given up the membership card. And my observation is that you would not have been able to do 160 episodes of this with me changing the subject and never actually finishing a topic without having done that.
Well, also it's an appreciation. And we're actually in the broadcast now, right? Mm-hmm. But it's an appreciation for the flow of spirit and trusting that what is coming forward needs to be what's coming forward, regardless of what I have planned to talk about. Mm-hmm. So, it's in that regard, it's been delightful because there have been times I'll sit back and say, okay, now, where's this going? And it's something that I need to hear or something I'm sure that somebody else needs to hear. So it's been really a pleasure in that regard, helpful. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, this is much less like a scripted dramatic program than it is like a football game. So the quarterback has an idea of the play that he wants to run, and they get up to the line of scrimmage and it starts. And then something happens. And sometimes they run the play and they execute flawlessly on the play. And sometimes they wind up doing something completely different or it fails miserably. So we're kind of like making it up as we go along.
Well, the key there is to not be so tied to it that if it changes or even if it fails miserably, it's really probably not failed miserably. It failed based on your plan.
It failed to meet them, right? What we were aiming for, or what we thought we were aiming for.
Yeah, we thought, right? But then, we don't know who's listening to us. And I don't think that spirit misses the boat or God, whatever you want to call it. I don't think that happens. So let's say, my job is to pick the subject, and those that are listening might not be, that subject might not be what's necessary at the time. Although for me, it's terribly interesting, probably. That's why I pick it. But it's being open to the flow of change. And that's kind of nice.
Okay, so what was the topic? What was the picnic lunch that you packed for today's little trip out into the woods?
Okay, so I packed the picnic lunch on manifestation, and you hear so much about it. And the reason that I chose it, because you hear equally, there's all excitement, about manifestation as a buzzword, and some believe, but what you also hear is disappointment about how it didn't happen for me.
Mm-hmm.
And matter of fact, I wasn't even thinking, you did your class recently on when it stops working.
Yeah, what happens when manifesting stops working? I mean, that's a big topic as far as I'm concerned, because manifesting is great and it works until it stops working, and then it's really frustrating because what's the matter?
Yeah, and so I have some thoughts about that, but we'll see where it goes.
Okay,
maybe my thoughts will happen, maybe they won't. We'll see.
Well, so start off on manifestation and where your current thoughts are, and I'll probably just interrupt somewhere.
Okay, so my thoughts are that I 100% believe in it, and law of attraction and all that business, but I don't believe in magic. Although I use that word a lot because I think it's like a really sizzly word, but not in the sense of Houdini kind of magic.
Right.
It's God kind of magic. But manifestation, there are so many moving parts to it. And here's one of my things, like when anybody takes something and run with it without doing some thoughts, and maybe, I hate to say the word research because that sounds hard and arduous, but without thinking it through and checking on the different dynamics in a thing. So if you use manifestation with the expectation of a magic show, then you're very likely to be disappointed. And I'm saying likely because things can happen like that. I mean, God has been known to pull off some things instantly.
Mm-hmm.
But usually there is, I call it a manifestation in process, in progress. And we ought not to, don't give up so soon if it doesn't appear immediately, because there are other dynamics involved, of which we do have more control than we thought or initially think. And that goes to the practical prayer in, something that you want to manifest, but then there's those steps in between that's saying, oh, okay, wait a minute, let's check this out. So before you throw it out and say it doesn't work, it's like, go back and check the list and see if you missed one of those moving parts. Did I explain it really well?
You set it up very nicely, and to quote you, that's a lot. So I'm gonna unpack it a little bit, and I'm gonna do it with metaphor and analogy. And my first observation is, I'm pretty sure it was Arthur C. Clarke, who is, among other things, the science fiction author who wrote 2001: A Space Odyssey and some other really cool stuff. He's been quoted as saying that magic, sufficiently advanced technology, is indistinguishable from magic. Which means that if we don't understand the technology and how it's working, it looks like magic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If we don't understand the technology, it looks like magic. Mm-hmm. Okay. So if you walk into a room and you flip the light switch, the lights go on. Mm-hmm. And we know exactly that that's what's going to happen, and there's no magic involved. We understand we're paying the utility bill, and we understand that we have to buy bulbs and all the rest of that. And we spend enough time with electric lights that we understand what the process is. You flip the switch, the light goes on. Okay. Pin that thought for just a second. We've all been to the Home Depot or the Lowe's or the hardware store and walked down the aisle, and there's a little bin full of light switches. You've seen those,
Mhm.
So you reach down into the bin and you pick out a light switch and you flip it and nothing happens. Is the switch defective? Are you unworthy? This is the same switch that under proper circumstances will make the lights go on, and it's not working. And the technology that's going on is, it's not part of a circuit now. There's no power supply, there's no light, there's no wiring, there's none of the rest of the pieces are in place to make the, quote, magic happen. And once they're in place, it happens with absolute dependability. So manifesting is much the same. It works. We claim our good, and the universe, boom, delivers our good to us. And that's really cool. And then sometime we try one of those affirmations to manifest something different, and it doesn't work. And it's not because there's anything wrong with the manifesting process. It's because it ain't connected. It is not connected. The circuit is not there and ready to go, because manifestations are basically claims that are activating our beliefs. And if we don't believe that it can happen, then it will work perfectly by not showing up because we don't believe it's going to show up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, that gets left out of much of the conversation about manifesting in the same way as somebody trying to sell you a light switch at the Lowe's and claiming that just by flipping the switch, the lights will fill up any room. There's more to it.
Yes. And that's what I was calling the moving parts, or the dynamics that go to it. And when you just hear the conversations now, and it's just so much noise on the internet and, various social platforms. I think they're wonderful. Don't get me wrong. I think they are wonderful. But I think you also have to take your brain in with you when you're listening to the noise, because these things are not promises. I wrote a piece on something. I named it The Dream Merchant. And I remember people will, back in the old days, they called them the snake oil salesman.
Mm-hmm.
And so the snake oil salesman, and then it came, I'm going to skip what I was going to say just now. It just came through the years and manifested itself in so many different ways. But I think that if you take your brain along with you, engage your brain, you'll understand that the dream merchant is just selling you what you already have. It's selling you a promise of what you have will happen. But there doesn't need to be someone else to do that for you. It's about your belief. And that seems so simple to say, so easy. It's like, it's about what you believe, but you can't sell me something that I don't believe I'm going to have.
Right. That doesn't prevent you from buying it or from investing in it, even though you're saying, I'm buying this snake oil because I want to have the result that the snake oil salesman is telling me I'm going to get. I don't believe I'm going to get it. And what happens is you don't get the result of the snake oil or what you claim that you're buying the snake oil to do. You get the result of your belief, which is continuing to not have whatever that good was.
Exactly. And so if somebody's listening, do the rerun on that, on the replay, so that you can hear that again. It's important to engage your brain in this thing. What part is ours to do? And if we don't believe it, why are we just, it's like, it's just no such thing as magic like that. You have to be a part of it.
Except it works for a while.
You think?
Absolutely. That's why the snake oil. I mean, if somebody came along selling snake oil and it never did anything and it never accomplished any good, then they could run out of town and nobody would ever buy any snake oil.
Well, there are enough people.
Now there are enough people who, I had rheumatism and now it's gone away, and my husband had left me, but now he's back, or my husband was back and now he's finally left me again, or, we struck gold, or we found the missing sheep, or whatever. You do the the manifestation or the affirmation, you take the snake oil, you buy into the dream, and then something good happens. And we assume that the power is coming from the snake oil or the dream salesman.
Okay, so now go back to your analogy. Each one that you mentioned, you had a part in it, right? Mm-hmm. You found the sheep. The snake oil salesman said, you take this oil and you do whatever you do with it, and the sheep will come back. Not unless you go out and put some energy into finding the little rascals.
Not necessarily. They may just wander back on their own. They may go out there and be completely scattered, and you buy the snake oil and you put it on wherever it's supposed to happen, and suddenly, simultaneously, there's a wolf or a noise in the distance, and the sheep say, "Whoa, this is really scary out here. I thought it was freedom. I'm going back home." And they show up, and there's no work involved. Or there's the arthritis is the art. Say it again.
The wolf came.
Whatever.
You're not just sitting there.
There's another force. That's something else that's going on. Somebody's been suffering from arthritis, or something else that's not working. They've got gout, or they're limping, and they put the snake oil onto the afflicted appendage, and they believe that that's going to fix it, and they get better. It feels better. The swelling goes down. The pain dissipates. They're able to walk. The good shows up in their life, and it's so easy, almost automatic, to make that connection that it was the snake oil that made the difference. Now, there may actually be something in the snake oil that will help, and the big part is I believe that it's going to help. That's what the scientific community calls the placebo effect, which is where people can be given morphine and makes their pain go away. And if there's no morphine available, or if somebody's doing an experiment, they can be given a sugar pill or some other inert substance and told that this will make the pain go away even more effectively than morphine, and the pain goes away. There's no actual physiological action of the compound, but the change in the experience of the person who's taking it is profound.
Okay, so maybe I'm still on the other side of, on the scientific side, but not really. I believe that because we came through a time where people would get a blessed handkerchief, or, through the mail, you send for it, and this is supposed to change things, and oil and water and all of that kind of business. And those things were, I think, a place to focus your faith or your belief. It wasn't in the inanimate object, the physical object, whether it was oil or water or the handkerchief or snake oil. It just was in your faith. And I think the faith is what moves it, right?
Yeah, it is done as you believe.
Exactly.
Or as the scripture said, as a man believeth, so it is done.
So that's why I said that I think you have to engage your brain a little bit, because you have to know to do that. Mm-hmm. The stuff will sit on the table forever. And listen, I come from that kind of thing. It's in my heritage. I had the folks on the street I came from. My father was from the South, and I saw the roots and the whatever. And I'd look at it. Well, I'm a city girl, right? What is that? I don't believe in anything. Like, from a kid, I'm thinking, you're crazy. But there were people down there that believed, and they had testimonies that whatever would happen. Okay, so then you fast forward into where I grew up, and I put two and two together and said, this is about what you believe.
Yep.
So you could have milk in the jar as opposed to oil. It's what you believe.
Exactly.
And that's what, so that's what I mean. You got to take your brain with you. Now, if you don't believe anything, I'm not sure anything happens.
Let's talk about suspending disbelief, but first we're going to take a little break. Then we're going to come back and talk about suspending disbelief, which is a double negative, but I'm positive that it'll make the point. It's Reverend Bill letting you know that the Practical Prayer for Real Results class is now available on demand. That's right, you can take it at your own pace, anytime you want. All of the information is at BeTheLight.com. That's B-the-light.com. You know where to find that stuff. The class is 5 lessons, broken down into 18 modules, and you can take them at whatever pace is comfortable for you. As you work through the process, it starts out with the theory, goes into the practice, there are experiential activities and exercises, and at the end of the program, you will wind up with an understanding of how practical prayer works, and a practical prayer for yourself that will work to create transformation in your life. And as you know, it works for everything. Take a look at the class online at BeTheLight.com. There's a sample lesson so you can see how the class is going to work for you, and then dive in. The great news is it's on sale now. You can register and save $20 off of the regular price. I'm looking forward to seeing you in class.
Welcome back to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marcioni.
We're having a conversation about double negatives of suspending disbelief. And to go back to the scripture where it says, it is done as you believe, if we have a disbelief, then that is what's being done. It is being done as we disbelieve, because we believe it's not going to happen. So when we suspend disbelief, we take whatever it is that we know can't happen or we think can't happen, and we say, am I willing to put that on hold? Am I willing to open up the possibility that maybe this could be different? Am I willing to stop insisting that this is what my life is going to be like? And that leaves an opening. And through that opening, all manner of good can pour into our experience. Because we're not predestined for any particular experience, whether we describe it as good or bad. We are predestined to be here having a human experience, and it can be as joyous or as annoying as possible. And all possibilities are open to us.
That's a whole nother podcast about we're here to have a good experience. And
all right, we'll leave that one on hold then. We'll just talk about manifestation.
Yeah. But you guys write that down because we did get to that. Send it to BeTheLight.com and say, remember to talk about that.
Go in. Yeah. Put a reminder that we should need to do the show that we said we were going to do to begin with.
Can you imagine how many, texts or emails you get about that? How many you promised and I didn't get this? We do it. We do it because it's one, right? So it's all the same. It's just coming in from a different direction.
Yeah. Now, before the break, you had mentioned, or we had talked a little bit about placebos. And the interesting thing about the placebo effect is when somebody does a scientific study, like a drug study, and they want to see if a drug is going to work, the first thing they do when they get people who are raising their hand for the drug study is they try and filter out the people who are susceptible to the placebo effect. And a third of the population is susceptible to the placebo effect to the extent that they get caught and rejected from clinical trials because they know from the get-go that that's not going to work. Because if you give somebody a pill and you say this is going to make you better and it makes them better and it's a sugar pill, well, that ruins the drug study because they think they're studying the drug. In fact, every time they reject people for the placebo effect, they just keep track of who those people are. It's like, you're very suggestible. So here, I want you to take this sugar pill and you'll go have a prosperous, happy, loving, wonderful life.
Is that why I get rejected? Is that why I get rejected, you think?
Don't know.
Okay.
Don't know. But if that is working and that is active, that's a claim by the scientific community that 35% of the population is demonstrating this every time they raise their hand for a drug study.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's what we're using when we get into manifestation. And the reason that it works is because I can make a positive, powerful, personal, present tense claim. I am prosperous. I have a lovely, wonderful relationship. My body is comfortable and works in perfect form and function. Whatever it is that we're going to be claiming, if we claim it and we manage to believe it, then that good shows up in our life. even if it hasn't been showing up before. And that's manifestation. And that is awesome. And yes, you can change your life through an affirmation. And sometimes we make an affirmation for something that we don't believe. Our mouth and our mind is saying, I am prosperous. And a little voice in the back of our head saying, your family has never had enough money. And you don't have 2 nickels to rub together. And the first of the month is coming up and there's no mortgage money. And it is not the affirmative claim that we're making. It's the belief that we have, the one that's hidden in the back of our mind that's actually active in our life. If I believe that I don't deserve it, then I will not get it because that's my belief, regardless of what I say I believe.
And I think that's where we might have started. And so I talked about the dynamics, the different dynamics that go into place there. Okay, so this is what I want to happen. There are so many possibilities in the ways that that particular thing can happen. That's where spirit comes in, and that's where I step back because I don't know the different ways that it could happen. However, without thinking, you can step in and say, well, I am prosperous. And, and this is what I want to happen. And you write it down and you keep looking at it and that's it. You write it 1,000 times, then whatever, and you write the vision, make it plain. Yeah, you do that. But what about the manifestation of this? I'm trying not to be negative, but what might I do if it hasn't shown up? What might I do, or what might have been in my belief system that was unrealistic? Like I want to manifest $10 million by Friday. Okay, so you believe God can do everything. Okay, so yeah, you throw that out there and you keep going, but then Friday you don't have $1 million and you're pissed with God.
Right.
It's not just that. It's a process in progress. It's not to say you're not going to get the $1 million. You may not get it for, 2 years from Friday, the exact date. So you hang in there.
Right.
But it has to be some level of realism in it on your part. Do you know what I mean? Like, do you need...
Maybe. You're saying realism and I'm saying believability. Because I have heard stories of people with a stage 4 cancer diagnosis and like they're given days or months to live and 30, 40, 50 years later, they're still around because the healing was so transformational. And oh, by the way, when they went back to the doctor's apologizing profusely because the initial test must have been wrong because not only is there no sign of the disease, there's no sign that it was ever there to begin with. The damage that we thought we saw in the initial test, there is no damage. The healing is so complete. We've heard about, we know about those. Those are cases. Those are actually things that happen.
I can't say anything there because I am a firm believer 1,000% in healing, and I can give you stories just like the ones that you mentioned. So I never think otherwise that healing is not going to happen. Now, we're all going out of here some kind of way. So, eventually something is going to escort us out of here or open the door for us to leave, however you want to look at it.
And that's because there's a line to get in, and you need to make room for people who, for the people who are still waiting behind the velvet rope there.
Okay. Which is a whole nother, whole nother thing.
Make room for somebody else to have a turn.
But I believe that healing happens. So you get nothing from me on that one. It happens. And I just fully expect it when I'm talking to people, they'll say that people have sent me notes, say, are you a healer? No, I can show you where healing happens or how it happens. And it's pretty simple that way about belief. Just, that's it. But other things, I think that we need to understand that we are part of the process. Is that fair to say? Because if you're going,
I actually want to take it back to something that you said before, which I think is key to this. That You do a prayer or an affirmation, or you're manifesting or making a claim, and to have the $1 million by Friday, and when the money doesn't show up, you get pissed at God, and that is not uncommon. Or you get pissed at the process, or you say that it doesn't work, sour grapes. And the thing that's telling me is that there is a belief in an external power. So if I didn't get it, it's because God didn't want me to have it, and this manifesting thing didn't work for me because God said no this time. Or if somebody doesn't have a God view, it's because the manifesting thing doesn't work at all. And yeah, it was a little parlor trick for a while when it was nothing important, but now when I'm talking about, Susie leaving, she's still packing, then it doesn't work. And that is where the power of a spiritual practice in general and practical prayer comes in particular. Because in addition to the manifestation, we've talked about this before, the manifestation is actually the middle step in a practical prayer. So instead of just claiming, and I'll use the loving relationship, instead of claiming, I have a wonderful loving relationship, which may or may not happen, and it's triggering all of my doubts and disbeliefs, and it has to go against all of the experience and history that I've had. What we do in a practical prayer instead is we identify the divine aspect of whatever it is that we're looking for. In the case of the relationship, it's probably going to be love. Okay, it's going to be love and harmony and balance. And those are the aspects of the infinite, that infinite creative power that creates everything that I'm going to be talking about. So I take it back. The first step of the prayer is to say, God is love. God is perfect balance and divine fitting together of all of the pieces. That is the true nature of that divine creative power that has created everything. I mean, it's all that love, and it's all fitting together. I mean, there are billions of galaxies and stars and planets that are all moving in their perfect order so they don't bump into each other, and there's room for us to continue doing stuff. All of these pieces are fitting together in divine order. And that same divine creative power has created me. It has to, because there's nothing else. That's the second step in the prayer. So we start by identifying that infinite source of everything, and we claim that that is love itself. That is balance and harmony and fitting together itself. And since that's all there is in the universe, that's true of me as well. I am that same infinite love. I am that same balance and harmony. I'm that same perfect fitting together. So that's how we're setting the stage. That's how we're opening ourselves up to that spiritual awareness of being part of something so much bigger than we are. And then we make the claim, I have my perfect loving relationship. And one of two things happens, is that resonates. And now I'm speaking that from my higher awareness of that divine presence. And I know that that goodness is filling my life because that's what's available and that's the truth for me. Or that little voice in the back of my head says, loser. That perfect, wonderful, loving relationship is never showing up. You don't deserve it. You haven't deserved it. You've been treating people poorly. And that is the indication that the manifestation, that the affirmation, that the claim isn't working. Because as we are partnering with that infinite intelligence that knows everything, and we're claiming something that we don't believe, it's going to tell us. So you don't believe that. And the rest of the steps of the practical prayer are about how you recover from that and get back to the awareness of that infinite power. You dismiss whatever disbelief you have. You suspend your disbelief so you can get back to that claim and claim that perfect, loving relationship. And the second time through, we might have dispelled that and said, well, I know a lot of people who are really questionable and they have perfect, loving relationships. So it's possible for them, it's possible for me. So I want something that's as good as, the wacko down the street. And that opens up our belief that this good could happen for me. I've seen it happen for other people, and I know that it's possible, so I'm going to claim that. And maybe we get another, nah, they're doing something right and I'm not doing anything right, so that good's not available for me, in which case we go through the process again. And what happens is that infinite creative power is always creating something. We are able to suspend our disbelief and open to something new, or the infinite is going to tell us, you're swinging too hard. You're reaching too high. It's not ready to happen now. And we get to recalibrate and readjust. So if I'm not going to have that, then I get to do another prayer for what it is that I do want, or I can find somebody who can help me understand what I believe and how to get past it. That's a lot.
No. Okay. It's a lot, but I got you because I've been through this process with you for a few times. But what I want to do is to wind back and say, okay, so where does it, on one of those steps where you stop and you say, well, this is not for me, it's for somebody else. No, it's for you. But if you've been a jerk, think about that. Why has it not happened before? What's preventing it from not happening? Like, you don't have 6 eyes across the top of your head. It's, there may be, I'm just suggesting that it may be a reason why this relationships have been breaking down. What's the common denominator? Maybe you're a jerk. So maybe you got to stop on one of those steps and consider who you are and what you're bringing to the situation. It may be some mess, right? So that's what I'm saying. You engage your brain in it. And so you can be in alignment with what you're asking for, because you're asking for something wonderful, but you're bringing crap. That doesn't work.
No, it works perfectly, but it doesn't bring you what you say you want.
Okay, so then at some point you say, okay, this crap is not bringing, it's identifying the crap, I'm saying. Because God is saying yes all the time.
Yep.
Right? Okay, so there's a reason why the manifestation is being held up. Okay, let's take another example real quick. Let's talk about finances and budgets, right? You want this manifestation of, wealth or whatever. And you have to, at some point, it's not working. Okay, well, why? Because you got rotten financial habits. It's so on that step, whichever it may be, where you're checking, what is it that you believe? I 100% believe that God can do anything I ask. Why is it not working? Well, because you are an impulse buyer. So if you stop, if you stop the impulse spending, then you may discover that you have more than you thought.
Right.
So, okay, so I've heard you say this. And you have a really beautiful way of saying it. I don't speak that, like nice about it, but perfect.
We'll see.
Ease and love and, everything flows perfectly. All right. Yeah. So the way I say it is, you need to get your behind in line for this tour. So yeah, it's possible. It's possible. And if God says yes, then there's a yes there. You are probably providing the no. So what is it? And it's not to put anybody down. It's the, I got in trouble in seminary for this. I told you that. They said that I put too much emphasis on what we do and not enough emphasis on what God does. And I don't think so. I think I'm saying I acknowledge what God does, but if you are an impulse buyer or you throw money away, how do you expect to even know that the manifestation has happened if you're constantly throwing it away? Okay, so that's what I'm talking about.
I would never have been able to meet you in seminary because I would have been thrown out well before you got there. Because, in the world around us, we can look at our activities, we can look at the people and the situations that we're engaged in, or we can look at spirit. We can look at God. And my point is, it's all God. Sometimes it's God as that divine awareness within, and sometimes it's God showing up as somebody who just took my parking space and causing whatever's going on in my mind. But it's all God. And there's always a possibility for something different to happen, for the experience to be different. And you're talking about prosperity. And, you can imagine a situation where somebody says, if I get another $100 a week at my job, then everything is going to be perfect. So what I want is another $100 a week in my job. And they get that, and then their kid needs orthodonture, and it turns out it's going to cost $200 a week. So suddenly they get the raise, but they're further behind than they used to be. Or something happens that, they get the raise, but then the company shifts stuff around and they get laid off. Well, okay, you got what you said you were asking for, but it's not what you wanted, but it's what you believed you deserved. So we got to be really clear about what it is that we're looking for. I had a client that I was doing some prayer work with, and I've told this story before, and she had been going through, really good times, lots of money, making lots of money, having a great job, expense account, the cars and the travel and all the rest of it, and then would run into a period of scarcity where it all went away and there wasn't enough money to cover the rent. And it was alternately feast and famine. And she was just tired of it. She said, I want to do something different. So we dug in a little bit, okay. And it turns out that when she was growing up, her family was in the real estate business. And in the real estate business, the way that they were doing it is when there was a closing, it was, we're going to have surf and turf. We're going to have the steak and lobster for dinner. And if there wasn't a closing, then suddenly it's going to be tuna noodle casserole 6 days in a row. And we hope that something's going to happen. And let's start pinching pennies. So the observation was, that's what she learned when she was a kid, that the world works, the finances work in feast or famine. And she was simply replicating that in her adult life. And once she realized that that's what was going on, we decided, okay, she's executing flawlessly on a flawed program. She is reenacting the feast or famine that she learned, that she believed in, and she was doing a great job of it. So let's change the program to just be prosperous instead, to have that steady flow, that uplift, that sufficiency. We changed the program, and she's doing great. And she has been for years now. It is as fundamental as understanding what we believe, maybe why we believe it, although that's not as important, and what we want to believe instead, what we're willing to believe instead. And suspend the disbelief and invite in something new.
So the part that you're saying she had to dispel is that things go up and down. Just always believe that they're always going to be.
She had a belief that finances were a feast or famine thing. That there was an alternating scarcity and abundance, scarcity and abundance. People who think, oh well, things are going great, but the other shoe's going to drop. So I understand where that comes from, but in this teaching, there's only one shoe. So it doesn't have to change.
Okay.
Right.
I got something in mind, but I'm running it through the same. I'll hit you back with this example later because you're probably right.
Okay.
You usually are with this stuff, so I'll just go with it.
There's some pressure. Let's take another break, and we're going to come back and do a prayer, and perhaps you're going to codify what it was you're just thinking about.
Learn to put practical prayer to work in your life. The steps are simple to learn and let you begin to get real results to create the life of your dreams immediately. Reverend Bill Marcione's widely acclaimed book, Practical Prayer for Real Results, gives you a clear summary of the New Thought principles behind practical prayer and the series of easy-to-understand steps found in the most effective prayers from religions and spiritual practices all over the world and throughout history. Practical prayer is not a replacement for your religion or practice. It's a technique to make the work you do in consciousness even more effective. The book includes 40 prayers on various topics that you can adapt as needed and use as your own. Practical Prayer for Real Results is available in paperback, Kindle, and audiobook on Amazon or at b-the-light.com. That's b-the-light.com.
Welcome back to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol. You're with Reverend Dr. Bill Marcione.
A wide-ranging and insightful conversation. Were you able to put into words what it was that you were thinking about before the break?
I think so, because I thought of an example, a real life like myself. I have no shame. I just tell people what I did, so.
Okay.
When I was in college, I had a plan, what I was going to do, and it was substitute teaching,
Okay.
I'm going to be a substitute teacher, stack the money on the side, go to graduate school, and I'm going to do that. So I put in my application, and that summer or that moment or whatever, they changed the qualifications for substitute teaching. So I said, door closed because I need this to do this. So the door closed. And I was really heartbroken. Anyway, throughout life, it seemed like the same thing would happen. Soon as I get to the door, the rules change. The rules change. So I finally sat down, and listen, I'm proud of myself because this is before New Thought. I said, look, God, what is going on here? Right? I should have this. I prepare for everything that I'm asking for, that and I step up to the plate. I am fully prepared. What you doing? The game keeps changing. And I sat with that, quite angry, of course.
Of course.
And here's what came back. And not in an instant, but over time, not a long time, but it kept coming back. You are planning for what you see in the moment. You're not sitting there imagining or thinking about the other possibilities. Therefore, you're not planning or opening yourself or preparing yourself for other possibilities. Well, that's all I need. You tell me, I'm cool with that. I say, okay. So then I start imagining, not even wanting to see things in front of me because this is not enough. Even if I get it's not going to work because things are going to change. So quick fast forward. I had this idea about the internet before it got to be the thing and how I could use it, blah, blah, blah. And I just kept going with it, and listened to people tell me that I was crazy and all of that. And bang, now I'm doing like 90% of the things that were thought to be impossible and ridiculous. And people stopped. I mean, I use those words, they're very strong words, but people would tell me, that's ridiculous.
That's ridiculous. That could never happen.
That could happen. And why would you even think about something like that? And I think, well, if I could think of it, it's got to be a God thought. That's the way I looked at it. It's got to be a God thing because I'm not sure, where did I get this idea? So yes, that's what I'm saying.
I'm gonna ask you, we're gonna do a prayer in just a second, and I'm just going to ask you because I'm aware of some of your story because I know that you went to school and you got out of school, and now you said that you wanted to be a substitute teacher, so you go to grad school. At some point along the way, you got into corporate America. So was that because the substitute teacher gig wasn't available?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So you did okay there.
I did real okay.
Okay. So the universe said, no, successful trainer in corporate America, you can't have that job because you're going to be a substitute teacher, wiping the nasal dribble off of third graders and hoping that they're going to call you for tomorrow. I think the universe had a better idea in mind, and it wasn't a no, it was a, something bigger's on the way for you because we understand the big picture of what Carol's believing in, even though her little treasure map to get there is going to take a couple of detours.
And I thank you for saying that because that's very complimentary. People will say to me that the reason why God lets you do things that I'm talking on both sides of the street, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
yes,
people that believe in this God if the reason that God lets you do things or whatever, because God knows you're crazy enough to go ahead and try it. And so if it's something crazy to do that God has in mind, he'll give it to you and you'll just go ahead with it because now they're saying this in an uncomplimentary way.
Right.
I've never heard that in a complimentary sense, except for when I walk away, I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and then
because
how many times have the people told you that you were crazy and, God's letting you do something crazy because you can. And then it turns out that crazy, quote, crazy thing that you were doing was actually brilliant and insightful and prescient and has led you to an experience that's beyond what any of the naysayers would have claimed for you.
Absolutely right. There's a thing with that too, though. You got to learn how, because the naysayers don't come with you. So you got to learn how to be okay with, you got to learn how to be okay with, with being by yourself and waiting to be open to meet people with broader ability to think broader. I'll put it that way. I'm trying to be as nice as I can. But yeah, but to me, it's work inside, like, because there were a lot of times I would feel bad and think, well, maybe I am crazy. But then God, then there's God.
Yeah.
And
let's
so
do a practical
why would
prayer.
God do that to me?
And the prayer is going to be about suspending disbelief, because that's been a lot of what we've been talking about during this, is like the self-judgment or the judgment of other people, the criticism or the self-criticism of this can't possibly happen. There's no room for this to grow in this particular situation. And the fact of the matter is, our belief is causative. The whole idea behind a practical prayer is to change our belief and open to the possibility of something new. And the biggest piece, if we believe something is possible, we can just do an affirmation and claim it and it shows up. It's like going into the candy store and having enough money to buy any of the candy and saying, I want the peanut butter cups, or I want the lollipop. We just choose what we want and then we get it. But when we have a belief that we're not going to be able to get it, we believe that the store is going to be closed, or I'm not going to have enough money to pay for it, I'm not going to choose properly, when our belief is one of limitation, we need to change the belief. So that's what this prayer is about. We're going to suspend disbelief. We are going to let go of the notion that whatever good it is that we are seeking is somehow not available to us. And we do that by turning our attention away from the circumstances, from the details, from the activity in our life, because that stuff is all going on and it's going to continue going on. And there's something bigger that's also going on. So as we close our eyes and turn our attention away from the specifics of the situation that we're in and open to the awareness of that infinite creative power, that one divine presence, that love, that source that shares itself, that has been creating by sharing itself since the very beginning of time. It's the same story, whether it's the Big Bang or Scripture, and choose your flavor. There's one power, one presence, one love, one intelligence, one energy, one source that shares itself as all of its creation. And it continues to unfold and reveal and evolve itself in new ways. And one of those ways is me. And one of those ways is each person within the sound of my voice. And in this universe of infinite possibility of all of these moving pieces, it is certainly possible for the pieces to fit together in a way that brings good, as we describe it: joy, uplift, harmony, prosperity, health, comfort, vitality, love, connection, relationship, uplift, creativity, prosperity, enoughness into our lives in a unique and wonderful and thoroughly satisfying way. It is possible. So I claim that good for each one who's listening now. The good that we are seeking is now seeking us, and anything that we might have believed is standing in the way of that is simply a shadow that has been blocking the light. And whatever that shadow is goes away, because that divine light of infinite love is bigger than any blockage, bigger than any shadow. So as we allow the obstructions to move away, as we open to that possibility of the greatness, of the grandness, of the bright light that is the truth of what we are, that goodness fills us. It flows to us and through us and into our lives and through our experience. There is nothing that stands in the way of this creative power. And so that good, as we understand, describe, and explain it, is already unfolding. Sometimes it's showing up in exactly the way that we thought it would. And sometimes it's so circuitous and around the bend that it takes a while for us to realize that the good, that experience, that feeling, that tone and texture of the life that we were seeking is actually ours, even though none of the stuff that we were talking about has happened. That's the good that I'm claiming for each of us and for all of us. And I know without any question that that is what is unfolding. And I'm so grateful for it. I'm so grateful for the wonderful way this is happening. I'm so especially grateful for the willingness of each one listening to suspend that disbelief, to momentarily pause the thinking that we're not worthy, or we're not deserving, or it's not the right time, or there's something that's going to get in the way of this. To suspend that disbelief and open to these possibilities, and join me in knowing that this good is unfolding. I'm so grateful for this. With this deep feeling of thanks, I speak this word and release it into that creative law that has been creating since the beginning of time. And I know it's now creating this. And so I let it be. And so it is.
The Practical Prayer Podcast with Reverend Bill Marcioni and Carol Lawrence is a production of BeTheLight.com.
be-the-light.com,
where you can find more information about practical prayer for real results.
Our theme is by Music of Wisdom. You can learn about the spiritual community of New Thought Philadelphia with daily guided meditations,
Weekly celebrations of spirit,
and Reverend Bill's classes in practical spirituality
at newthoughtphilly.org.
This podcast is supported by listeners like you. We're grateful for your tax-deductible donation at newthoughtphilly.org or the link in the episode description.